Every renal problem is hiding one question. Where in the kidney is the problem? All those diagnoses that you memorized, they're really just different locations along the same tube. If you know what each part does, the labs are going to point you directly at the answer, and you can improve your score immediately. Most students never learn it this way. Instead, they memorize cutoffs without actually knowing why. In this part 2, I'm revealing more exclusive footage from our paid course that teaches renal by location, not by just memorizing a bunch of disease lists and characteristics. This is the approach that makes renal questions feel like easy points and can skyrocket your score and your confidence.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this very slowly as I would in the real test to show you that, again, the goal of this is that you read it slowly enough that you only have to read it one time. And then we're going to go through the pathophysiologic chronology, and then we'll talk about the concepts underlying it. A 35-year-old woman is brought to the emergency room after being lost in the wilderness for 48 hours while hiking. She reports drinking from a stream, however, afterwards experienced severe nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Labs are significant for a serum creatinine of 2.5, BUN 50, FeNA is 0.5%, urine sodium is 10, and urine osmolarity is 600. Walk through the pathophysiologic chronology, specifically explain the serum creatinine, BUN, FeNA, urine sodium, and urine osmolarity. Right. So I'm going to copy this into the Google Doc, and then I will have you guys write your. Okay, perfect. So we'll talk about the summary first, and then we'll go through and talk about the individual concepts that this problem highlights. Okay. So the summary pathophysiologic chronology is basically she drinks something bad, gets nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. So she's a prerenal AKI. So because of that, her BUN to creatinine ratio is above 20. Her FeNA and her urine are both down. Her urine sodium are both down, and her urine osmolarity is increased. So we're going to talk about the mechanisms behind this so you can understand in context, right? So you don't just memorizing these numbers, go FeNA, like go, you actually understand in the context of EDH and urine osmolarity. So the summary of the key concepts that we're going to discuss, so what you will understand by the end of this is basically that first, all fluid in the body is isotonic, except the renal medulla and the distal convoluted tubule. But basically, I think it's much easier to know the rule or generally the exception, and then everything else is rule, right? So the exception is the renal medulla and the distal convoluted tubule, right? So you can see the renal medulla gets pretty hypertonic, right? And the distal convoluted tubule gets pretty hypotonic. But outside of those two things, everything in the body is basically isotonic, except for sweat. Technically sweat is, but everything inside the body. But before the loop of Henle, the thing to remember is that tubular fluid is always isotonic. The loop of Henle creates basically hypotonic fluid, right? So it creates excess free water, right? So it's creating hypotonic fluid, right? So osmolarity that's less than 300. And it's always true, except in the case of tubular dysfunction. So if you have an intrarenal AKI, this is not true. And that's basically the job of the loop of Henle, to create hypotonic fluid and then to make this hypertonic, the medullary. And then after the loop of Henle, you have a choice. If you have high ADH, you can reabsorb the free water, and if you have low ADH, you won't. Okay, so this is where we're going. So this is probably giving you some trepidation. Let me reassure you that this is all very understandable, and so we will discuss it. Okay.
If you're serious about maximizing your scores, join our 14-day mini course now. We'll send you 14 high-yield videos that break down the exact concepts and test strategies our students use for 260+ scores. Click the link in the description below now to get instant access.
So let's start with everyone's favorite concept, countercurrent multiplication. So Adriana, do you happen to know what the main purpose of countercurrent multiplication is?
The main point of countercurrent multiplication would be to create a gradient where you can absorb free water in the cleansing tubule.
Boom. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, exactly. So basically to make a gradient in the interstitium, right, across the interstitium, or using interstitium. So the interstitium becomes hypertonic, right? And the tubular fluid becomes hypotonic, right? This is the main point. If all you guys remember about countercurrent multiplication in the loop of Henle is that the tubular fluid becomes hypotonic and the interstitium is hypertonic, honestly, that's pretty much all you really need to understand to answer most step 1 or step 2 questions. Okay, so this is critical. So Amir, what are the two major components of this? It's kind of a bad question. Let me just say. So basically, it's kind of a read my mind question. So I'll give you another question for this. So basically, you have the sodium potassium 2 chloride reabsorption in the thick ascending limb, and then you've got osmolarity equilibration via the water movement through the descending limb. So the loop of Henle is the ascending and the descending parts, right? So in the ascending part, you reabsorb solutes and not water. And then in the descending part, you reabsorb water, but not solute. So what is the tubular fluid osmolarity before and after the loop of Henle on the ear?
So before the loop of Henle, I believe that most of the electrolytes was reabsorbed in the PCT. So I would say it's relatively hypotonic.
So remember what we said. Remember the exception and everything else is the rule. So the exception is distal convoluted tubule, basically everything from the distal convoluted tubule onwards and the interstitium. But the rule is that everything is isotonic in your body. Everything. We're excluding sweat because it's not inside. Everything is isotonic, except for after the loop of Henle and the interstitium of the renal medulla. So before the loop of Henle, the tubular fluid is what?
Isotonic.
It's isotonic. It has to. It's always isotonic. This is one of the most common mistakes that I see people make is they'll give you that like diagram of, oh, what would happen in this situation? Like what would the osmolarity be in the proximal convoluted tubule and the thick ascending limb? It's always isotonic in the proximal convoluted tubule, always. Whether you're like kidney failure, whether you're pre-renal, whether you're intrarenal, post-renal, it's always isotonic.
Okay. So after the loop of Henle, it would have actively reabsorbed most of the electrolytes. So that would have to be hypotonic.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing to focus on is not that you're reabsorbing electrolytes. I love that you're thinking about it that way. But remember, to change osmolarity, you need to not only absorb electrolytes, you also have to not absorb water, right? Because in
water,
the more, why is it isotonic? Because even though the vast majority of electrolytes are being absorbed in the proximal tubule, it's still isotonic. So why is that?
I guess since it's the first thing that comes up once the serum or once the blood is filtered from the glomerulus, so it's mostly going to like override most of what the PCT is doing. So that's why it remains isotonic.
Oh, true, but unrelated. It's true. It is the first thing that comes up, but that's like, so again, remember to change osmolarity, it's not just, so when you're reabsorbing solutes, you also will naturally absorb water, right? The waterfall follows salt. So in the proximal convoluted tubule, you are reabsorbing solute, but you're also reabsorbing large amounts of water with it.
Okay.
That makes sense? What's different? So Burke. So what's different, Burke, about the loop of Henle?
The descending part of the loop of Henle will be insoluble to solutes, but soluble to water. And then the ascending loop of Henle will be only soluble to solutes, but now insoluble to water.
Perfect. So you can change the osmolarity in the loop of Henle because the different limbs are soluble. One of them is soluble only to, is permeable only to water and not solute, right? The descending part. And the ascending part is only permeable to solute and not water. So that's why before the loop of Henle, it's always isotonic, always, because it's permeable to both solute and water. So it will reabsorb both solute and free water in equal portions. Because, unless there's a problem with the sodium potassium trichloride channel, it will always be hypotonic afterwards because the thick ascending limb is going to reabsorb solute and not water. So again, we're going to say this again and again, but again, the main point of this you have to know is that before the loop of Henle, it is isotonic always. The loop of Henle is going to make the tubular fluid hypotonic and the interstitium hypertonic. If you remember where we're going, if you can keep in mind the big picture where we're going, like the forest, then the trees are going to maybe hopefully make more sense. So I'm going to come back to this theme a lot because this is really confusing. I found this really confusing, even though I was like a chemistry major in college. I found this really hard to understand. So don't lose sight of this. The loop of Henle is essentially adding free water to isotonic fluid. Technically, it's removing solute. So you can think of it as creating free water. And it's moving that solute to the interstitium, so it's causing the interstitium to be hypertonic. Okay. So this is what we're trying to prove with this entire lecture. All right. So thick ascending versus thin descending limbs. So Shama, so in the tubule, what direction does reabsorption occur? From the tubule to the interstitium or from the interstitium to the tubule, generally? So quick question.
It goes from the tubule to
yeah, generally speaking, yeah. So generally from the tubular fluid to the interstitium, ultimately. So Deb, so the thick ascending limb, can it reabsorb solute, water, or both?
Solute?
Exactly. How about water? Can it reabsorb water? Yes or no?
No.
No, it can't. Remember that. That would be like, probably not tattoo worthy, but it's pretty close. It's pretty important to understand. So the thick ascending limb, right? The whole reason why we can concentrate our urine is because the thick ascending limb can reabsorb solute and not water. It's amazing to think of, but like all those animals that live in the desert that have like really long loops of Henle, and they can reabsorb like crazy amounts of free water and a really concentrated urine. It's all because they can reabsorb solute and not water. Pretty amazing to think about, right? Like the subject seems kind of dry in some ways, no pun intended. But like it's pretty cool when you think about the consequences of this. Like this allows you to regulate your osmolarity, and it's all because of this. It's all because the thick ascending limb can absorb solute and not water. So thick ascending limb. So use what it can and cannot reabsorb, right? Solute versus water, to explain what effect it has on the tubular osmolarity.
So the thick ascending limb can absorb solutes and it won't absorb water. So the tubular osmolarity would be low because it's reabsorbing, it's going into the interstitium.
Yeah. What effect is that going to have on the interstitial osmolarity?
Increase.
Yeah, this is it. This is like the mystery of like all sorts of animals. Can't remember. There's some like special, I don't know, some really special animal that has like a really long loop headland. But this is where. So Giovanna, so the thin descending limb reabsorbs solute, water, or both?
It can only reabsorb water.
Great. Yeah, exactly. So only water, not solute. So then Jared, so use what the thin descending limb can and cannot reabsorb to explain what effect it would have on tubular osmolarity.
So if it can only reabsorb solute and not water, it would make it.
Nope. Remember, it can only absorb water and not solute.
Oh, sorry. It can only reabsorb water and not solute, so it would become hypotonic.
Okay. Oh, wait, no, hypertonic. It only absorbs water. So if you're absorbing water, the tubular osmolarity is going to go up. And you take away free water, and you increase the amount of salt in the tubular fluid.
Oh, okay. I see.
So again, the key is that the descending limb can reabsorb water but not solute, and the ascending limb can reabsorb solute but not water. Okay. This is the magic. This is where the magic happens for regulating how much free water you absorb or don't. It's pretty amazing when you think about it, right? Because again, the common mistake that I see people make again and again for both step 1 and step 2 is that, oh, if I decrease the amount of sodium that I reabsorb, then that must lead to hypernatremia. Or if I increase the amount of sodium I reabsorb, that must lead to hypernatremia. That is wrong. That's wrong because you're not taking into account the free water that goes with it. When I reabsorb sodium, I'm also reabsorbing free water with it. Or I still wouldn't call this free water, but I'm reabsorbing water with it. So if I have like hyperaldosteronism and I increase the amount of sodium that I'm reabsorbing, I don't become hypernatremic. I get hypertensive because I'm reabsorbing lots and lots of sodium and thus lots and lots of water. But because it's not affecting my free water balance, I'm not changing my serum concentration. I'm just affecting my total sodium. Affecting the serum sodium concentration comes because of the loop. All right. So again, this is where we're heading. I want to be very clear on what I'm trying to get at. I'm not just doing this just for the sake of talking about concurrent multiplication, although it's just interesting, right? I'm doing this because this is how we can regulate free water, is because of the loop of Henle. So the key is, again, right? So before the loop of Henle, so this is the loop of Henle right here. This is the loop of Henle. So before the loop of Henle, everything is isotonic. It is, right? Everything in your body is, inside your body is isotonic, except for, right, the interstitium. As you descend, it becomes hypertonic, more and more hypertonic. And then the tubular fluid right after the loop of Henle. So the loop of Henle, basically everything from the loop of Henle onward and the interstitium. Those are the only things that are not isotonic in the body. Everything else is isotonic. But the loop of Henle is what makes it happen. Okay, so this is our goal of what we're going to explain. So again, by the end of the loop of Henle, we have lots of free water and the interstitium is hyperosmolar. That's the key. Cool? And so why? So the reason is that by the time that we get to here, the end of the distal convoluted tubule, now we have a choice because we have really hypotonic fluid. And so if I have high ADH, I can reabsorb the free water because now the free water can be reabsorbed because I have hyperosmolar interstitium. But if I want to get rid of free water, I can get rid of it by just having low ADH. And so then I'm not able to reabsorb that free water. So this is the whole point of what we're talking about. Questions about where we're headed? All right, let's walk through what would happen in let's do a simplified version of countercurrent multiplication. So let's just pretend, so this is the loop of Henle. This is the descending limb, this is the ascending limb, this is the interstitium. Okay. Let's just pretend that before all of this happened, this is a contrived example, but let's just say everything is isotonic. Like we said, the thick ascending limb can reabsorb solute, not water. The thin descending limb can reabsorb water, but not solute. And so let's just say, so remember, so before the loop of Henle, the tubular fluid is isotonic, just like everything else in your body, minus the renal medulla. And after the loop of Henle, your tubular fluid is hypotonic. So let's explain why this is. So first, the thick ascending limb reabsorbs solute and not water. Right? So we absorb solute, so sodium, potassium, G-chloride. That's the sodium, potassium, G-chloride channel. The problem is that water can't follow. So because of that, we have made this fluid, we have made the osmolarity, the interstitial osmolarity up and the tubular osmolarity down. Does everyone understand that concept? Or who does not understand that? Because if you don't, it's my fault and I need to explain it better. Because this is a pretty critical concept. Okay. So the ascending limb osmolarity is now going to go down and the interstitial osmolarity is going to go up. Okay. So all because of the thick ascending limb. So because of that, because now the interstitial osmolarity is increased, I'm going to have water that's going to move into the interstitium, right, to balance out the osmolarity. So the descending limb osmolarity is going to increase. Okay. Everyone's following so far? So what happens is something that looks like this, right? So we've taken solute from the thick ascending limb and moved it into the interstitium. So the interstitium is now hyperosmolar. Because it's hyperosmolar relative to the descending limb, water is going to move to the interstitium and thus making this until they equilibrate in terms of the osmolarity. So then it's just a matter of repeating the process, right? So we have our initial where everything is isotonic. And then first we're going to have in the thick ascending limb movement of solute and not water. So you're going to make this hypertonic, the interstitium hypertonic, and the thick ascending limb fluid hypotonic. And then that's going to equilibrate with the thin descending limb because water is going to move such that the osmolarity is equal across these two membranes or crosses. And then let's say that fluid flows. And so now these 400s now displace these 200s and these 200s move up. So now we've got the 400s here and the 400s here, right? All of these 400s have shifted over by 3. And the isotonic fluid from the proximal tubule has now come in to the loop of Henle. So that's going to equilibrate. And so that's why that's why this is, the interstitium is 300 here in terms of osmolarity, because it's going to equilibrate with the tubular fluid from the proximal tubule. And then let's say the same thing happens, right? So we move solute from the thick ascending limb into the interstitium, and then that's going to equilibrate again with the thin descending limb because water can move from the thin descending limb into the interstitium. And then the same process happens again. But ultimately what happens again, so this is a little confusing. This, honestly, you may want to spend some time just like sitting down and thinking about it for a bit. But for now, the key point is this. The loop of Henle moves solute from the tubular contents to the interstitium. By doing so, after the loop of Henle, there's excess free water, right? So it's hypertonic, and the interstitium becomes hypertonic. Before the loop of Henle, the tubular fluid is always isotonic, always. By the end, the tubular fluid is hypertonic. The interstitium is now hypertonic. That's it. That is what we are just trying to explain. But again, the whole thrust of this is that we are trying to explain why by the end of the loop of Henle, there's lots of free water, and why the interstitium is hypertonic in increasing amounts as we descend. That's it. That's all we're trying to explain. Cool. Megan, tell me, like, how does this feel? Like, I need to get a sense of like how well I explain this. I realize this is a lot of information.
Yeah, like you said, I think I just need to sit down afterwards and really go through it. Like, I get why it's happening, but I don't know. I just think, like I said, I just need to sit down and really go through it on my own.
Yeah. So we're going to go through more examples. But again, so what's most confusing? Because that means I didn't do a very good job of explaining it.
No, you did. Like, I get the thick ascending limb, it's permeable with solute, not water, and like the thin. So, and I get why that's happening. But I think what confused me is with how you had the 400s moving up and the 3, like that kind of confused me.
Totally. So honestly, if you don't understand that, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
That's like not the end of the world. This is just like a way to explain, if you're wondering how it happens, how the magic happens, this is a way to take yourself step by step. The basic idea, and again, I don't think I did a very good job of this. So do you understand how you get to the 200s on one side and the 400s? So the 200s in the thick ascending limb and the 400s here in the interstitium?
Yeah, because solute's going into the interstitium, the osmolarity is going to go up. That makes sense.
So what you don't understand is this part where, like, where did these?
Yeah.
Where did they come?
The interstitium then?
Nope.
No.
Remember, so this is the flow of fluid. So the fluid is coming, again, I don't think I did a good job of explaining this. The fluid is coming, that enters the loop of Henle. Where is it coming from?
Okay. From the interstitium?
The fluid, remember, the fluid is coming just from the proximal tubule.
Oh, okay.
This is the 300 is coming from this. So the way that the kidneys work, the way that the glomerulus works is that you've got blood that flows into the afferent arteriole, goes to the glomerular capillary, filters through into Bowman space, ultimately ends up in the proximal tubule. That fluid, is it isotonic, hypertonic, or hypotonic?
Isotonic.
Isotonic. How about in a prerenal AKI?
So in pre-renal AKI, you're not having as much blood, so you're not able to filter things out. So in hypotonic?
Nope, it's always isotonic. That's a trick question, and they are going to trick you. They're going to trick you.
Okay.
Remember, before the loop of Henle, the proximal tubule fluid is always isotonic.
Okay, it's always isotonic.
But how about how about if it's a kidney stone and it causes backup?
It's isotonic.
Isotonic, thank you. Exactly, right? Why?
Because it's always
It's always
isotonic.
I guarantee
Okay.
they love asking that question. And like a third of them are going to be hypotonic, a third of them are going to be hypertonic. So you can eliminate 2/3 of all the answers just by remembering that this is always going to be isotonic. It's so beautiful.
Okay.
It's so satisfying. So satisfying. You're like, boom, I now have a much better shot. Okay, great. So I've got tubular fluid that's isotonic, right, in the proximal tubule. That's going to flow through, right? It's going to displace this fluid in the loop of Henle.
Okay.
So if there's fluid, so that's what's happening. So the fluid
So that's where the
coming from
300s. Okay.
tubule, that's where the 300 is coming from. And it's always 300.
Yeah.
That's why it's 300. So it's displacing, right? So there's 6 400s here. So if I moved 3 300s here, displace 3 of the 400s.
Oh, 3 to the other side. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, that makes sense now.
Okay. Well, Hannah, how did I do? Did I redeem myself? Or I bet there's still things.
No, you did pretty great. I understood so far.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's ask them some questions. So then, Mohana, so before the loop of Henle, what's the tonicity of the tubular fluid?
Before the loop of Henle is going to be isotonic.
How about in a prerenal AKI?
Always isotonic.
Boom. Yeah. Exactly. It's always isotonic. The loop of Henle
Yeah.
takes isotonic fluid and it removes solutes. That's like what we're building towards. So you're making hypertonic tubular fluid and hypertonic interstitium. And so Paula, after the loop of Henle, what's the tonicity of the tubular fluid?
It's hypotonic
Hypotonic. Great. Why?
because the thick ascending limb would reabsorb solid, but it cannot reabsorb water.
Boom. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it takes isotonic fluid and removes solute, particularly the thick ascending limb, as you said. And so you're making hypertonic tubular fluid and the interstitium becomes hypertonic. Great. So Sue, if the loop of Henle did not make hypotonic fluid, what would be the problem? This is like one of the hardest questions I'm going to ask in this PowerPoint. If you didn't make hypotonic fluid, what would be the problem regarding your free water balance?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
That's okay. If someone knows, I'll be really impressed because I don't even know that I would have known this question. Burke?
Would be losing water, free water?
What do you mean?
Am I interpreting this question correctly in thinking that basically what you mean is that my NKCC and my sodium potassium chloride transporter is not working anymore?
Yeah, like this, I think it's a bad question on my part. So let me rephrase it. So if my loop of Henle made isotonic fluid, what disadvantage would that give you?
Basically, I can't reabsorb any water anymore.
I see. But what if I could make it? What if I could make a hypertonic interstitium, but I had isotonic fluid after the loop of Henle? What if I could magic? What would be the downside, Shama?
That we're actually losing electrolyte.
I just think this is maybe a bad question. Hopefully, my explanation will make sense because I hope this is going to be an Alki card. So hopefully, this will make. But the key is that if the tubular fluid were isotonic, you'd be unable to get rid of free water, right? You want it to be. You want the fluid. The point I was trying to make with this is that you want the fluid after the loop of Henle to be hypertonic. I didn't do a very good job of explaining it. I certainly didn't do a good job of asking it, so I apologize. But the point that I'm trying to build towards, and the thing that I want you guys to be thinking about is if the tubular fluid after the loop of Henle were isotonic, you couldn't really get rid of free water. So let's talk about why that would be. So let's orient ourselves. This is now the part after the loop of Henle. So this is the collecting duct, collecting tubule, right? So in our diagram before, that would be this. So after the loop of Henle, so we're now after the loop of Henle. So we're now talking about the collecting duct, collecting tubule system. So normally the fluid entering the collecting duct, collecting tubule is hypotonic. But we're going to see what happens if that fluid is isotonic. Actually, sorry. We're going to see what the fluid, if the tubular fluid is hypotonic, we're going to see the actual situation physiologically. Okay. So remember, the loop of Henle makes hypotonic tubular fluid. So let's say that ADH is high in this case. So if ADH is high, so what again does Shama, Sujith, let's go to Sujith. Sujith, what is ADH?
So it absorbs urea and water, every one,
Sure. In this context. So how does it allow you to reabsorb free water?
through V2 receptors.
Sure. But what do the V2 receptors do that allows the reabsorption of free water?
So once it's actively absorbing water from the tubular into the interstitium.
Yeah, but why? Have you ever wondered why? It's just magically
Well-
like I just snap my fingers and I'm like,
When there's like severe hypotension.
you're telling me why? I'm asking you how.
Oh,
It starts with an A, ends in aquaporin.
aquaporin.
What is
Those are channels that allow the water to, those are channels that present in the collecting duct that allow water to permeate from the tubular to the interstitium via the idiot hormone.
Good. Yeah. So it causes the placement of aquaporins into the collection tubule so that you can have reabsorption of free water. Okay. So it'd be like these. But Susanna, why would free water be able to be reabsorbed in the first place? Like why, if I just put aquaporins into any cell, I'm not necessarily going to get like free water reabsorption. I actually will not get free water reabsorption. So what's special about this circumstance that allows for free water to be reabsorbed?
I think it's because the interstitium has like more solids than the tubule, so that's why you are able to like what?
Exactly. That is exactly right. So the interstitium, right? I didn't even say this, but you knew it, right? So the interstitium is increasingly hyperosmolar as you descend. So if I put an aquaporin, right, it's not like I'm actively driving free water reabsorption at this point. I'm not using, it's not like ETP that's like forcing the water to move against its gradient. It's moving literally down its gradient, meaning it is going from an area of high free water to an area of low free water. Or in other words, an area of being hypotonic, right? This is hypotonic fluid, 100 milliosmoles is hypotonic, to an area that's hypertonic, or in this case, isotonic, but in this case, it's hypertonic. Cool, does that make sense? So the outside of the tubule is hypertonic relative to the inside, right? The interstitium is hypertonic relative to the inside. So if there's an aquaporin, right? Normally, if there's no aquaporins, then I can't reabsorb the free water because there's no channel for it to move through, even if it wants to move. And so the key is that now water can move from the tubule into the interstitium, and it will make the urine osmolarity. What do you think? So what, Adriana, what would the urine osmolarity be in this case?
Molarity would be above 300.
Be hypertonic. Great. Perfect. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you please repeat this again? Because it's a little bit confusing for me.
Oh, please. Which part is confusing? Because I don't want to repeat everything.
Like, yeah, the ADH part, like how the aquaporins work. According to my understanding, wouldn't the water be in the interstitium because the osmolarity is quite high in the interstitium? Then why would it go into the tubular fluid? I'm not understanding that.
Why does what go into the tubular fluid?
Yeah.
No, I'm asking you. I don't understand what what do you mean? What is going into the tubular fluid in your understanding?
Like you just said, right? That the ADH causes like it inserts the aquaporin channels. The water will go into the tubular fluid, right?
No, that's not true. We're on the
Okay,
same
so-
page. Well, kind of on the same page. Water should not move into the tubular fluid. Water will move out of the tubular fluid. Water's here,
Yeah.
and the water is
Yeah.
moving into the interstitium.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? So the cool thing in this case, right? The cool thing that I want to point out is that again, right? You're just taking advantage of the gradient that you already have, right? There's no HEP that's being used to move water against its gradient. It's moving down its gradient. But what it also means, the punchline is going to be that if you can't form this gradient, then you can't reabsorb free water. So there's a lot of clinical like consequences of this, but the biggest is that you can't concentrate your urine if you have an intrarenal AKI. That's why your specific gravity, we'll talk about this, but your specific gravity will be, you can tell if someone has an intrarenal AKI because their specific gravity is going to be 1.010. So it's pretty cool. It's actually really useful. Okay. So now let's say that we don't have ADH. Okay. So Amir, so again, so same situation as before, right? So our loop of Henle, right? Remember, creates hypotonic tubular fluid. So by the time that it gets to our collection duct and collecting tubule, it is hypertonic. But now in this case, we're switching it around. So we're going to say, let's say that there's no ADH. So Amir, what would happen if I do not have ADH?
I'm assuming since you don't have ADH, you won't have any aquaporin channels
Yeah,
at the water just
aquaporin
pass by.
channels.
So it won't be reabsorbed. It just passes through the collecting ducts.
Exactly. You're not going to have water that's going to move into the interstitium. So now Burke, yeah. Sorry. I messed up the animation. Yeah. So I can't reabsorb it because there's nothing to move for it to move through. There's no aquaporins for it to move through. It can't be reabsorbed. So Burke, what would the urine osmolarity in this case be?
urine osmolarity would be isoosmolar.
Remember, our tubular fluid to start is what?
300.
No. Remember, the whole point of the loop of Henle is what?
To basically create a hypotonic fluid.
Good, exactly. So by the time it gets to the collecting tubule, it is what? Hypotonic, isotonic, or hypertonic?
By that time, it is hypertonic.
Hypotonic. The tubular fluid is hypertonic, right?
Yeah.
Remember, this is the whole point of what I'm trying to get at. This is what I'm driving at, right? So by the time that it gets here, right? So this is explaining what happens if ADH is high. But so forget this number here. But basically the fluid, by the time that it's getting to the collecting tubules is hypotonic. There's a lot of free water here. So what I'm building towards, the whole point of why I'm saying this is that by the time that it gets, it's kind of cool. It's pretty cool design. By the time that this fluid gets to your collecting tubule, you have a choice of either reabsorbing free water or losing free water. It's pretty cool. If you have high ADH, you reabsorb free water. Low ADH, you reabsorb free water. So that's sort of what we're building towards. Okay, yeah. So it's high. So what would the urine osmolarity, if I have no ADH work, be?
It's going to stay hypotonic. I guess my problem is, but I guess that's going to be clear from the question always. I guess what I'm comparing it to is, am I comparing it to like serum osmolarity? Am I comparing it to?
Serum osmolarity is, I mean, again, unless you're really like, typically around,
always constant, right?
In problems of free water, like that,
there will be obviously,
right? You can have different osmolarity, but like the normal serum osmolarity is about 300. Cool. All right, so Shama, let's say what would happen if I were to have no ADH and my urine osmolarity is 100. In a normal person, what effect would this have on my serum osmolarity?
Your serum osmolarity would elevate.
I'm losing free water from my body. Therefore, the amount of solute relative to my free water, which my water, is going to increase. The serum osmolarity is going to increase. Cool. That's great. Okay, so now this is what I was trying to ask before, right? Like, I just want you to imagine a scenario in which your tubular fluid is 300, but you still have the interstitium being increasing osmolarity, right? Because again, the whole, like, God or evolution or whoever designed the loop of Henle went to a lot of trouble to make it so that we have hypotonic fluid here. So let's just consider a scenario like of what would happen if your tubular fluid was not hypotonic by the time it gets to the clutching dock. This is obviously not the real situation, but let's just see what would happen. So Deb, so what is your serum osmolarity roughly?
That's about 300.
So Deb, what if the tubular fluid was isotonic to start? So what if we started with tubular fluid that was 300? What would happen if you had high ADH? So the interstitium is still hypertonic, but the tubular fluid is now isotonic to start. What would happen?
There is no free water in the tubular fluid. There is no free water to get rid of.
Yeah, but remember, so the reason why water moves, period, is why. Like, why would water move from one compartment to another?
If there's solute gradient or...
Exactly. Great. So the question is there a solute gradient between the tubular fluid and the interstitium? Yes or no?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
Is there a solute gradient between the interstitium? So the interstitium, right? So at the top of the clutching duct working tubule, the interstitium is maybe 300, then it goes up to 800, and it goes up to usually maybe 1200. It's like the top. Is there a difference between the osmolarity inside the tubular fluid and outside in the interstitium?
So at the beginning, there would be no gradient, and as the tubular fluid goes to the metallo side of the collecting duct, there would be a greater solute gradient.
Great. So could you reabsorb free water in that case?
Yes.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. Right. So remember, ADH, prototic importance. So at the proximal end of the collecting duct, there would be no water reabsorption. There's no water reabsorption because, again, this would be isotonic to this, like you said. However, as you descend, you would have water reabsorption. Because remember, right, as you descend, water reabsorption would still happen like normal, right? Because the tubular fluid is hypotonic, right, 300, relative to the interstitium. So you could still get free water reabsorption as you descend. So in other words, if I started with isotonic fluid in the collecting tubule, right, again, this doesn't happen. Under no physiologic circumstance does this actually happen. I just want to illustrate to you the brilliance of this system, right? So you could have still reabsorption of free water if you had high ADH. However, what if I had no ADH? What would happen? Let's think about this. So Forum, what would happen if I had no ADH and the tubular fluid was isotonic at the end of the loop of Henle, what would happen?
There won't be any aquaporin channels. There won't be any water being reabsorbed.
So there's no aquaporin channels, right? So we'd have no aquaporin channels. So water would not be able to move into the interstitial, right? So water would stay here. So in this case, then, Quorum, what would the urine osmolarity be?
It will be the same because
What does that mean? Give me a number.
300, the same.
So it'd be the same as it was in the start as it was at the end, because you're not changing the free water composition. So then, Giovanna, what effect would that have? So what effect would that have in the low and the no ADH case? What effect would that have on the serum osmolarity?
It would increase the serum osmolarity
Increase it. Why?
because you're not reabsorbing water.
Remember, the serum osmolarity is what?
Oh, 300. It will stay the same.
Exactly. So in other words, it is critical that the tubular fluid be hypotonic when it enters the collecting duct collecting tubule. Because if it didn't, you couldn't lose free water, right? You couldn't increase the serum osmolarity. You could decrease it, right? You could reabsorb free water, but you couldn't increase it. It's pretty cool. Again, this is one of those, this is probably the hardest conceptual, like, what was his name? Richard Feynman, the really famous physicist at Caltech, was one of the things that he used to say was that, like, if you understand a concept, you should be able to teach it to an intelligent third or fourth grader, right? Like, physics really isn't that complicated if you understand it well. You should be able to explain it to basically anyone. I feel like the same thing is true. The exception to that rule that someone called about on was quantum mechanics. That is just mind-boggling. But like classical physics, true, according to. I think the same thing is true with medicine. But if there was ever going to be an exception, it would be concurrent multiple. Like, I think usually you could explain just about every single concept in medicine to an intelligent fourth grader. Right? It might take you more time, but you could understand. It's not conceptually that challenging if you understand it well. If there was going to be an exception, I think it would be this. It would be concurrent multiplication. Okay, so again, the whole point of this, the whole point that I'm driving at is that the benefit of having hypotonic fluid after the loop of Henle is that you have lots of free water. And with that free water, you have two choices. You can either reabsorb the free water and make your serum more dilute. Right? If you're hypertonic serum, you could make yourself more hypotonic or closer to isotonic. But because you have so much free water, you also have the choice of losing that free water, which would make your serum more concentrated. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool what the loop of Henle is able to, what the choice that it's able to give you. Cool? So again, loop of Henle creates free water and causes your interstitium to be hypertonic. This is the whole point of what we're talking about, so that you can have a choice of what to do with that free water once it gets to the collecting duct. Okay, questions so far? You guys like tired of loop of Henle? Hopefully this makes sense, right? The whole point of like,
Hey, Alex.
Oh, Fred.
I think at one point you asked if the fluid after the loop of Henle were to be isotonic, would there be any water reabsorption? And you said there wouldn't be initially, but there would be later on. Could you explain that one more time?
Sure, yeah. So the concept here that you need to remember that I don't think I did a very good job of explaining was that the movement of free water in the first place happens because there's a gradient between the interstitium osmolarity and the tubule osmolarity. So at the top of the tubule, what is the interstitial osmolarity in this case, in this hypothetical scenario?
300.
300, great. What's the tubular fluid osmolarity?
300.
So if I placed an aquaporin here, would free water move from one side to the other? No, why?
There's no osmotic gradient.
Exactly, that's it. That's all. But how about if I descend? So here, the tubular fluid osmolarity is 300 and the interstitial osmolarity is 800. So if I put an aquaporin here, would water move from one side to the other?
Why would the interstitium osmolarities change?
Because that's the whole point of the loop of Henle.
Oh,
That's what the loop of
okay.
Henle
So,
does. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Remember, I kind of glossed over this, so I apologize. But yeah, the osmolarity increases as you descend in the loop.
Okay, that makes sense. I think I forgot to remember that the loop of Henle was beside the collecting duct. Okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? That was a great question. Okay.
You mentioned in the beginning that you said if the patient has aldosteronism, when you check their labs, it won't be like indicative that it's hypernatremic. What about in the case of a congenital adrenal hyperplasia in that case?
Shouldn't be different. So I take that back. In the case of if you have mineralocorticoids are low, then you could potentially be hypotonic, like hyponatremic. But that's because ADH is increased because you're so hypovolemic.
Okay.
I don't want to get into that. Let's not get into that. If you want to talk about it in the office hours, we can discuss it there. But I think that's just going to muddy the waters too much. There's just too
Okay.
much background explanation.
Okay.
Sorry, Matt. It's a good question. It's a great question. This is probably not the form. Okay, so let's do Jared next. So the main purpose of concurrent multiplication is what? And how does it contribute to maintaining serum osmolarity?
So it's to create an interstitial ion gradient to allow you to reabsorb water.
Gotcha. So why is this important for maintaining serum osmolarity?
And is the last part of the collecting duct, the only thing you can really do is change how much water you reabsorb, but it only works if you have a high gradient in order to reabsorb the water. So if your serum osmolarity is low, you can absorb a lot of water using this high gradient.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the whole point is to make lots of free water in the tubular lumen so that you can reabsorb it if you have high ADH, or not reabsorb it and lose free water if you have low ADH. That's it. That is it. So let's talk briefly about ADH. So what effect would this have? So Megan, what effect would high ADH have on your serum osmolarity?
So in high ADH, you're going to want to absorb more water, so your serum osmolarity would go down.
Perfect. And if Mohana, if your ADH was low, what would effect would this have on your serum osmolarity?
So if the ADH is low, you're not going to reabsorb as much water. So your serum osmolarity is going to go.
Perfect. So the primary purpose is just basically to maintain serum osmolarity. That's it. That's the main purpose. So if serum osmolarity is too high, what would your ADH response be, Paula?
You just have to reduce your ADH.
Okay, so think about this. So my serum osmolarity is high. So if my ADH was too low, what would happen?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Since your serum osmolarity is too high, you need more water in your system. So you want ADH.
Perfect. Exactly. Yep. That's probably the way I would think about it. So like for my osmolarity, if my osmolarity is too high, I need more water. So yeah, so you'd have high ADH. Good. So if my osmolarity is too low, then Sue, what would the ADH response be and why?
If your serum osmolarity is too low, in that case, you would not want ADH to be released because you would want to concentrate your serum as much as possible and get rid of that excess water.
Boom. Yeah, exactly. Very good. If you would want your ADH to be low, so you lose free water. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So we talked about this. Yeah. So we talked about this. We wouldn't be able to lose free water. Great. Okay. So the end result for the tubular osmolarity of the thin descending limb, the interstitium, and the thick ascending limb is that the osmolarity increases as you descend more, and that the osmolarity in the interstitium, right, that decreases as you descend more. The interstitial osmolarity should increase as you descend more. Yeah, that should be good. Right. So as you go down, your interstitial osmolarity goes up. So what we clarified earlier. So our interstitial osmolarity is going to increase as we go down. And then the tubular fluid, basically, again, you can think about, okay, the tubular fluid osmolarity increases as I go down. But really the key point is that as you get to the end of the loop of Henle, you have hypotonic fluid. That's the key, right? That is the key. So just before the loop of Henle, the osmolarity of the tubular fluid, let's go back to the top. So Adriana, so just before the loop of Henle, what is the osmolarity of the tubular fluid? And how will this vary depending on your age?
It will be isotonic no matter what.
Boom. Thank you. Thank you. It's always isotonic. Does not vary with ADH. So just after the loop of Henle, what's the osmolarity of the tubular fluid in mirror?
Just after the loop of Henle, it should be hypotonic.
Yeah, exactly. It's always hypotonic and won't vary with ADH unless, again, you have like ETN or something. If you have intrarenal AKI, then this can be. Okay. So does the absorption of free water require ATP? What's the mechanism?
It's a completely passive process.
Yeah, exactly. At least the direct process of reabsorbing water. Yeah.
Right.
ATP independent. To get the gradient in the first place, uses ATP. But once you have the gradient, that's completely passive. Wonderful. Great. So if ADH is high, what would the osmolarity of, we already talked about this. I think we understand. Great. So now let's talk about some clinical applications. So Shama, so other than the sodium potassium ATPase, what ion channel is most important for allowing for countercurrent multiplication to occur?
I would say, like the sodium chloride, potassium.
Exactly, the sodium potassium 2 chloride channel, right? Without it, you couldn't move solute without water, right? That's the thing that's allowing you to move solute in the thickest limb. And so, Deb, what's the mechanism of action of furosemide, and where in the nephron does it act?
furosemide acts on the sodium potassium 2 chloride channel and blocks this channel. It has some thick ascending loop of Henle.
The thick ascending limb. Good. So blocks that same channel. So forum use furosemide mechanism of action to explain the effect on ADH, on the ability of ADH to allow for free water rate.
So furosemide blocks the sodium potassium 2 chloride channels, so there won't be any reabsorption of these solutes. I think the ADH should be high. I'm not sure.
That was my question. So if your ADH is high, what could you absorb free water? You can't. So that's the crazy thing, right? So again, remember, the sodium potassium 2 chloride channel is what is, it's one of the major pieces of magic of countercurrent multiplication. If you don't have it, you lose countercurrent multiplication. You lose the ability to make the gradient in the first place.
Okay.
So here, let's talk about this. So furosemide blocks the sodium potassium 2 chloride channel. So because of that, you're unable to move solute from the tubular fluid to the interstitium. Because normally, right, the whole point of the thick ascending limb is that you could move solute but not water. But you can't do that if you block the sodium potassium 2 chloride channel. So because of that, you can't make the interstitium hypertonic. And if you can't make it hypertonic and generate free water here, then you also lose the entire mechanism of that ADH uses. Because remember, water flows passively because there is a difference in the gradient there's a difference in the osmolarity between the tubular fluid and the interstitium. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so Giovanna, so what's the mechanism of thiazide?
They reabsorb sodium in exchange for calcium.
So that's one of the offshoot mechanisms, but the major mechanism is it blocks the sodium chloride channel and the distal convoluted. You're right, it will cause an increase in the sodium reabsorption, but that's an indirect effect of blocking the sodium chloride channel
So it blocks the sodium chloride channel, so you do not reabsorb both?
Correct.
Okay.
So Jared, so are thiazides or loop diuretics more likely to predispose to hypernatremia, and why?
I think it's thiazide, diuretics.
Yeah, why?
I'm trying to think if I just know offhand that hyponatremia is a side effect of thiazides. I think loops, you would reabsorb water with it.
Because loops, again, the problem is that, so thiazides don't interfere with countercurrent multiplication. You can still become hyponatremic. You can still reabsorb free water. Remember, hyponatremia is a problem of free water.
Okay.
Loop diuretics block countercurrent multiplication because their whole function is predicated on having sodium potassium 2 chloride channels at work. But loops work by blocking the sodium potassium 2 chloride channels. So there are important clinical applications to this. One of them is that loop diuretics are unlikely to give you hyponatremia, or unlikely to be the cause, because it blocks countercurrent multiplication, right? So this is our summary. So again, remember, all fluid in the body is isotonic, except for basically the loop of Henle and the interstitium. Before the loop of Henle, the tubular fluid is always isotonic. The loop of Henle, via countercurrent multiplication, creates hypertonic fluid. So by the time it gets to the end of the loop of Henle, it's hypotonic. And that's always true. It's always going to be hypertonic unless you have some sort of tubular dysfunction, either like an intravenous API or furosemide. Anything that causes dysfunction of the loop of Henle will cause you to not be able to create free water here. But barring that, it's always going to be hypertonic. It's when you get to the collecting duct, collecting tubule, that you have a choice of what to do with that free water. If your ADH is high, you can reabsorb the free water, or if your ADH is low, you can lose the free water. And that is going to allow you to fine tune your osmolarity, your serum osmolarity. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our question. So I'm going to have you guys go back to the Google Doc and you guys can write in your answers, your new answers, now that you understand this stuff better. And I'll keep this open to the summary of key concepts and we'll talk about it. Okay. Great. Thanks. So basically it has dehydration, decreased blood volume, so decreased preload, decreased stroke volume, decreased cardiac output, decreased perfusion. Great. Love it. That's really good. Decreased blood flow through glomerulus, decreased GFR. Great. So less creatinine is filtered. So increase in blood. Love it. Yeah. Less BUN is filtered and more is given. So there's increase in the blood. So there's increased reabsorption in the loop of Henle, increased sodium reabsorption. Yeah. Good. Decreased FeNA. Good. Yeah. Because you're increasing the sodium. So less of your sodium is going to be lost. So remember, FeNA is just how much sodium is lost relative to how much is filtered. So of the stuff that's filtered, more of it's going to be reabsorbed. So your FeNA is going to go down. So hypoosmolar fluid and then distal tubule. That's okay. Always true. Increased aldosterone. Yeah. So So what I want is why is there hyperconcentrated urine? Why is the urine osmolarity high? That's what I'm not seeing here. So the reason there is because ADH is high. So if you have hypovolemia, so remember the typical response of ADH is to only respond to changes in serum osmolarity. However, if you're really hypovolemic, I think it's 15%, 20%, then you'll have ADH increase. That ADH increase is going to cause free water reabsorption using the concentration gradient formed via the loop of Finland. And that's going to cause urine osmolarity. That was pretty good. That was actually really good. Okay, so let's go through what I said. I actually like Jared's better because he gave a lot more detail. Okay, so my pathophysiologic chronology was woman had nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. She became hypervolemic. Free load was decreased. So that meant her stroke volume was down, cardiac output's down, renal perfusion down, pre-renal AKI. Okay, so Jared and mine were pretty similar. Where he did a much better job was he explained a little bit more about the mechanism. So ADH causes BUN reabsorption to go up. And so BUN and both BUN and creatinine are going to be filtered less because there's less blood getting to the glomerular capillary. So the BUN and creatinine both can increase. However, because the BUN is also reabsorbed in the case of having IDH, because it's the hypovolemia, more extreme hypervolemia, your BUN is going to increase faster than your creatinine. So that's where your BUN to creatinine ratio is going to increase. There's going to be sodium reabsorption. And again, I love the fact that you said why, but yeah, basically everywhere where you can reabsorb sodium is going to increase the sodium absorption. So sodium potassium gluchloride channel, it's the distal convoluted tubule, RAS, all those things. So less of the sodium that enters, that is filtered through, is going to actually be lost. So my FeNA is going to go down because remember, FeNA is just how much sodium is lost relative to how much is filtered. So if I reabsorb 99% of my sodium that's filtered, then my FeNA is going to be 1%. I'm going to lose 1% of it if 99 is reabsorbed. And my urine sodium concentration is going to go down. So ADH is also going to go up. So as we said, and so the free water reabsorption is going to go up, and so the urine osmolarities. Okay, questions, thoughts, concerns?
I'm sorry, Alec. When you're done recording these, where do you usually post them on the USMLE website?
So this will be in Renal. So I think the last one was posted there as well. Yeah, so this is a Renal lecture. So it'll be, so it's right here. So if you go to all courses and lessons, this is a Renal lecture. So you'll go to, yeah, so you'll see. So make vignette automatic. That was last week's. So this week's will go down. Should be okay from the next several days.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? How was this? Was this like, Amir, how was this?
I thought it was really helpful, especially the last part when you explained why hyponatremia occurs with thiazide diuretics versus loop diuretics. I never thought of that. It never crossed my mind, but now that you explained via the countercurrent multiplication, how water is still reabsorbed via thiazide diuretics, but that's not the case with the loop diuretics. Now, that makes a whole lot more sense as to why you see hyponatremia with thiazide diuretics.
Perfect. Awesome. That's great. Yeah, because again, like, you can use this to explain like important clinical things. So perfect. Bora?
Alec, I have a question. Yeah, I didn't understand the part how the sodium reabsorption increases, so I was completely lost over that part.
Love it. Yeah. Basically, I just completely hand waved. But in general, right? Yeah. So sodium is reabsorbed at like lots of places, right? So sodium is reabsorbed in the proximal tubule, in the thick ascending limb, right? The sodium potassium gluchloride channel, right? So sodium is reabsorbed here because like sodium is co-transported with like almost everything. So if you want to reabsorb glucose, it's co-transported with sodium. But a lot of things are reabsorbed sodium. But there's a lot of sodium reabsorbed here in the proximal tubule. There's a lot of sort of less, but still a lot reabsorbed in the thick ascending limb. There is less, but still a fair amount reabsorbed in the distal convoluted tubule. And then RAS, right, controls sodium, aldosterone specifically, controls sodium reabsorption in the collecting duct and collecting tubule. So if you're hypovolemic, what happens to the sodium reabsorption in all these places?
Increases?
It increases. Yep, but just us. Via various mechanisms. So that's where the hand waving comes in. But yeah, sodium reabsorption everywhere increases.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great question. Other questions or thoughts?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear. Perfect.
Oh, sweet. Okay, good deal. I was just going to say this is my first session and a little early in the game, but it was really cool to see how everything is integrated together. So like the second I would think of a question while you were speaking, you addressed it in the next thing. And it was also cool. Like a lot of these things sound familiar and I'm seeing them like either in first aid or in a practice question. But now I understand the why behind it and why these certain things are important. So it's refreshing, especially because I'm starting to see how I was putting my emphasis on the wrong syllable and training this entire time while studying. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you felt that way. Yeah, that's the goal, right? The goal is just to try to, my goal when I make these is to try to, I think one of you was saying like, you like how you can explain why now. And you can see the mechanisms behind it, and it makes it a lot more fun. That's essentially my goal, right? My goal is that you can see that these aren't just like words on a page to be memorized, but actually concepts to be applied. Because if you know the concept, you can apply it in lots of different contexts. We'll minimize the amount that you have to memorize, and it will, I think you'll do better, like practically you'll do better on tests, but in a bigger sense, like you'll just enjoy it more and you'll be a better doctor. Okay, so awesome, guys. I will see you next week, and hopefully my office will be open and it won't be snowing so much. But okay, yeah, thank you guys. Everyone's favorite thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this slowly as I would in the real thing. And the way that we'll do this is I'll have you guys write your pathophysiologic chronologies, and then we'll go through the lesson. Okay, so a 65-year-old man is brought to the hospital by his wife due to worsening confusion for the past several days. The patient's wife says he has had a 15-pound weight loss with dry cough over the past 3 months. He has a 50-pack year smoking history. Temperature is 37 Celsius. Blood pressure is 115/75. Pulse is 80, and respiration rate is 15. The patient is disoriented to place and time. Mucous membranes are moist with no jugular venous distension. Lungs are clear to auscultation bilaterally. Labs are shown below. Serum sodium, 115. Chloride, 95. Potassium, 4.1. Bicarb, 24. BUN, 10. Creatinine, 1. Glucose, 110. Serum osmolarity, 260. Urine specific gravity, 1.041. What is the pathophysiologic chronology? What is the significance of the serum osmolarity and urine specific gravity? Why are the mucous membranes moist with clear lungs? What would be the next best step in management? All right, so I'm going to copy and paste this to the Google Doc. I will have you guys write out your pathophysiologic chronology, and we will talk about it. Okay, so I am going to walk us through my pathophysiologic chronology, and then we're going to talk about it. All right, so the summary version, if I were to do this in time, like on the test, would basically just be, well, significant smoking history, develops small cell lung cancer. From that, develops the perineoplastic syndrome of SIDH. From that, he gets symptomatic hypotonic hyponatremia, and you need to treat that with hypertonic steroid. This is the more detailed description that we'll go through next. But yeah, this is pretty classic. But again, there's a lot of things that I threw in there to try to make it a little bit harder. And so hopefully this helps make sense of it, but the explanation should have even more. Okay, so again, this is what we're building towards. So the summary of key concepts is that with SIDH, you have excess reabsorption of free water. So everything is going to be based around this. So because of that, and that's why the urine osmolarity is so high and the serum osmolarity is so low. The neurologic symptoms from SIDH are basically because the serum osmolarity is so low and causes free water to shift into brain cells, and that's what's causing the dysfunction. So he was confused, right? That was why his wife had to bring him in. That's because he couldn't bring himself in, and that was because he was confused, and the confusion was because his cells were swelling because there was a bunch of free water entering in. True hyponatremia is a problem of free water, not of sodium. This is, again, super important for hyponatremia. Everyone thinks that you become hyponatremic because you lose sodium. That is not true. You become hyponatremic because you have too much free water. There's lots of things that cause hyponatremia, but the only thing that you need to use hypertonic saline for, again, this is particularly for step 2 and for medicine/surgery, for courtships, the only one that you really need to use hypertonic saline for, because this comes up a lot, is if it's symptomatic. And they have to be hypertonic and hyponatremic and with. Okay, so let us start from the bottom. Susanna. So, oopsies. What exactly is osmolarity?
The general concept, you mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, it's just like the concentration of a solution.
Essentially, yeah. It's essentially technically it's the osmoles of solute per liter of solution, but really it's just amount of stuff that's dissolved per.
Yeah.
But technically it's osmoles of solute, amount of stuff dissolved. So Sudith, basically what that means is that the amount of particles dissolved in a given volume is what I said. So the more stuff that's dissolved, the higher the osmolarity. Really, for like what you need to know as a doctor or a medical student, this is pretty much it. It's like all the subtleties of osmolarity, osmolality doesn't really matter for you. Really, if you just know amount of stuff dissolved per volume, that's good enough. And so, Fuja, generally speaking, how could you increase osmolarity?
By increasing the solutes or decreasing
More solute is one, or you can
decrease the solution.
Yeah, exactly. You can either have more stuff dissolved and or have less volume solution. Pretty simple. So again, this is just to remind you of the loop of Henle, right? So again, we learned in our previous lessons that the loop of Henle basically just creates free water. The thick ascending limb allows you to pump out solute and not water. And so by the end of the loop of Henle, you have a bunch of free water. So the osmolarity is low. Another way of saying that is that the amount of free water is high. And so by the time that you get to the end of the distal convoluted tubule, you have a choice of whether to reabsorb free water or just pee it out in varying proportions based on the radiation. This seems foreign to you, you can go back and watch some of the other earlier vignettes, but this is the general idea that we are going to use, we're going to build on in the context of SIDH. And yeah, again, by the end, you have the choice. If you have high ADH, you can reabsorb the free water that is created by the loop of Henle, or if you have low ADH, you can excrete the free water. So this is going to change your serum osmolarity. This should all be familiar. Okay, so let us go next to Sue. So Sue, I unfortunately just showed all the answers, but can you tell us, before the loop of Henle, what is the tonicity of the tubular fluid?
Let's see. What does tonicity mean?
Oh, tonicity is the amount of stuff dissolved. Tonicity.
Oh, before it's going to be isotonic.
Normal. So in other words, is it isotonic, meaning the same tonicity as serum? Is it hypotonic, meaning lower tonicity than serum, or hypertonic, higher osmolarity or tonicity relative?
I believe it's always isotonic.
Boom. So what does that mean? What is the osmolarity in the before the loop of Henle?
Before the loop of Henle, isotonic?
Yeah, but what is, so I'm pushing you to
Sorry. Yeah, 300?
yeah, very
The same
good,
as
right? Because that's the osmolarity of serum. Always isotonic, always whatever the serum osmolarity is before you get to the loop of Henle. Great. So Paula, after the loop of Henle, what's the tonicity of the tubular fluid?
Oh, so since in the loop of Henle, I think you've basically reabsorbed solute but not water. So are you a little bit hypotonic?
Hypo. Great. Yep. For exactly the same reason you said. You reabsorb solute, not water. So you are taking out solutes and not water. So you're going to make it hypo. Great. And so Nick, if the loop of Henle did not make hypotonic fluid, what would be the problem regarding our free water balance?
If the loop of Henle made hypotonic fluid, you wouldn't be able to reabsorb water in the collecting duct.
Actually, you could. You could reabsorb water. What could you not do?
Not entirely sure.
You couldn't get rid of free water. Because remember, the interstitium, yeah, we'll talk about this, right? So if our tubular fluid, so this is to remind us of last time. So again, we are going over the concepts again to reinforce it. So let's say that the tubular fluid, so it is hypertonic. So it's about 100. And so the interstitium, as you descend, as you get deeper into the medulla, the interstitium becomes more and more hypertonic. So it starts at maybe around 300 and then you end up close to like 1200. So ADH, Megan, does what?
So antidiuretic hormone, so you're going to want to reabsorb water
Good. How does it do that?
by moving aquaporins into the collecting duct and letting water flow through.
Exactly. And so is that an active process? Like what actually causes the water to move then?
It's moving down its concentration gradient. There's less water, so it's not active. You're not using ATP, you're just using the gradient.
Perfect. Exactly. So the interstitium is hyperosmolar relative to the tubular fluid. So water is going to move out because there is a concentration difference between the two. And so the urine osmolarity in this case, then, Megan, let's just keep going. What would the urine osmolarity be in this case?
If you have high ADH, your urine osmolarity would be low. Yeah, because you're reabsorbing the water, so there's less water in the collecting duct. That's what's going to end up in the urine.
So give me a number though.
300,
What do you,
100. Oh.
right? You would equilibrate with the interstitium at its most concentrated point.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because here, if you were to measure the tubular fluid here, it would be about 300. By the time that it gets to here, because the interstitium is 800, you would equilibrate. So it would be about 800. And by the time that you get to the end, it would be about 12.
Okay.
Right. So, Jared, if the urine osmolarity equaled the serum osmolarity, will the serum osmolarity increase, decrease, or stay the same?
Are you saying in that last example where you had ADH?
Nope. Different question. If the urine and the serum osmolarity were equal, would the serum osmolarity increase, decrease, or stay the same?
should stay the same
Stay the same. Great. Why? Why, Jared?
because there would be no net movement of ions or water. Everything's in equilibrium, so you wouldn't be reabsorbing free water or over excreting sodium.
Exactly. So in the urine, right, the amount of stuff that you're losing, dissolved stuff, is equal to the water, right? So are you not losing or gaining free water? So your osmolarity shouldn't change. Again, the theme of if I lose sodium, right, I don't become hyponatremic, right? Reason being, if you lose solute, you will also lose free water as well. And so it's the proportion of that that matters. Just saying, oh, I'm losing sodium doesn't necessarily mean that the proportion of the water and the sodium that you're losing is going to change. So Hadra, if the urine osmolarity is less than the serum osmolarity, will the serum osmolarity increase or decrease?
If the urine osmolarity is less, that means if it's hypotonic, then the serum osmolarity, then the serum will have to lose solute and it will lose water. I don't get the question. Can you explain?
So let's say that our urine osmolarity is 100 and our serum osmolarity is 300. What will happen to the serum osmolarity in that case? Will it be more than 300 or less than 300?
Urine is hypotonic and serum is isotonic. So we're going to lose solute and that will make it lose water as well.
Yeah, I think I probably didn't do a good job of explaining this. So let's think about it differently. Because you're saying like hypotonic. I don't think, or isotonic. I don't think that's a good way of approaching this. Let me suggest instead to think about this in terms of the relative amounts of free water. So if your urine osmolarity is less than the serum osmolarity, do you have more free water in the urine or less free water in the urine?
More free water in the urine.
So in other words, if I'm losing free water, so in other words, I would be losing free water when I pee.
Yeah. So if you're losing free water,
The serum osmolarity.
serum osmolarity is gonna go high.
Perfect. Yeah. Just think about this, like really, like you should think about these things as in terms of free water. You remember? Did you see how much easier that was?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So you just explained why. So there's more free water in the urine than in the serum. So the serum free water is going to decrease. I'm losing free water. So if that's true, then again, it's pretty easy. If I'm losing more water than I am solute, my solute concentration, my osmolarity should go up. Great. Okay. So if I were to lose sodium and water in equal proportions, right, the total concentration of stuff to water, of sodium to water, is going to be unchanged. If my urine equals my serum osmolarity, so I think I did this, so there's 10 sodiums and 10 waters. Yep, 10 and 10. So in other words, if I lose 2 sodiums and 2 waters, right, the proportion is still the same. I've got 8 sodiums and 8 waters here. Cool. Makes sense? All right. So Giovanna, so if the urine osmolarity is less than the serum osmolarity, will the serum osmolarity increase or decrease?
It will increase.
Okay, why? So again, think about it in terms of free water. Do you have
So
the urine or too little, less free water in the urine?
You have more free water in the urine and less free water in the serum. That's why the osmolarity is increased.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well done. So there's more free water in the urine than the serum. Great. So your serum osmolarity should go up. Okay, great. So if my urine osmolarity is less than my serum, that means that there's more water that I'm losing than solute. So if that's true, right? So again, there's 10 and 10, right? So there was 10 and 10. So now, right, there is 9 sodiums and 8 waters. That's it. Pretty simple. But I think it's easier to think about it in terms of free water. Does this make sense so far?
Can you repeat it again about the cases? Previous case where the serum osmolarity was greater than urine and this one?
So in this case, so let's just take this. Let's take this example. So if my urine osmolarity is less than my serum, right? And so it's not intuitive. So you have to think it through. You actually have to walk yourself through. It's like statistics. It's not intuitive. You can't use your intuition to guide you. So let's think this through. So if my urine osmolarity is low, that means that my free water is high. So that means, so it's this situation, right? It means I have more water than solute relative. So if I'm losing more water than solute in my urine, that means I have less free water in my blood, which means the concentration of solute, right, my osmolarity is going to be high. Cool? Does that kind of make sense?
Hey, so I don't want to jump the gun here, but what would be an example of that situation, like where you'd be losing more free water than solute?
Great.
Like just physiologically or even
Me right now, I'm drinking lots of water and I'm going to have really low ADH.
Okay.
So I'm not going to reabsorb.
Okay, so this would be like a low ADH kind of setting.
Anytime you have low.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Deb. So if my urine osmolarity is greater than my serum osmolarity, what effect will that have on the serum osmolarity? Will it increase it or decrease it?
Your osmolarity would decrease.
Okay, tell me why.
In terms of free water, body with those more sodium, more solutes than free water. And so in the blood, in the serum, in the blood, the solutes will be less than water.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That was really good. And again, it feels really painful to walk yourself through it. It's not intuitive. It's like thinking through like sensitivity, like it's a simple test of like sensitivity versus like positive predictive value. If you've done like the stats videos, like it's just not intuitive. You have to sit there and really think about it. It's really hard, especially like towards the end of the day. It's like really hard to think these things through, but it is totally worthwhile. Got to do it. That was good. It was really good. Yeah. So again, if we think about this in terms of solute relative to free water, we have more solute. We're losing more solute than free water. So that's true. The osmolarity should go down. So again, got 10 and 10, right? 10 sodium, 10 water to start. So in this case, it would be if I lost more solute than I did water. What I have left is I have a higher water concentration than I have salt. There's the osmolarity here is going to go down. Cool. Again, there's like some things that I think like you might have to watch a couple times. This is one of them because again, it's just not intuitive. It's like statistics. It's just not intuitive. So let's go through some examples. So Danielle, in water deprivation, what would the serum osmolarity be? And what would the urine osmolarity be and why?
Okay. So in water deprivation, your serum osmolarity would be high because you would have less water in your body fluid to dilute out this the serum osmoles, and your urine osmolarity would also be high because you would want to be reabsorbing as much water as possible.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really good. If anything, the way that I would challenge you to take the next step, because that was really good, Danielle, would be to try to connect it and to actually think through the mechanistic way.
Okay, yeah, I just skipped saying the ADH would increase, so the free water reabsorption, yeah, with like urea reabsorption as well. Yeah, but yes.
Sure. So Boogie, in SIDH, what would the serum osmolarity be and what would the urine osmolarity be?
I think it would actually think it would be opposite because at this point we have too much antidiuretic hormone. So that means that you would be having a lot more water in your serum and so then therefore your urine osmolarity actually may be increased because you're going to be diluting. Your urine should be diluted.
Leaving urine should be diluted.
Because if we have too much ADH, no, I'm sorry. So the kidneys are actually going to respond to the ADH, right? Wouldn't you be concentrating?
Yeah, exactly. So urine osmolarity would be high. How about serum osmolarity?
Serum osmolarity should be low because you're concentrating the urine, but you're diluting your bloodstream.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. So really high ADH leads to really high free water absorption, which means, right, your urine osmolarity would be high and your serum osmolarity. Boom. That was great. That was fantastic. Okay. Because again, this is one of those things like I remember when I was in your stage and I got so confused between SIDH. I always got SIDH and diabetes insipidus mixed up. In reading through your guys' pathophysiologic phenologies, I have to say that I was not the only one. It's hard. It's hard to do, especially in like a time setting when you're like under pressure. It's good to think these things through. So just simplify it. So in water deprivation, right, your ADH is high. What that means is that you are, right, essentially what you're doing is you filter all this stuff. And if you just have less free water, right, you just have less free water in your blood to begin with. And so your ADH ends up being high. And so you'll reabsorb the water. So your osmolarity will increase in your kidneys and it'll still be, your osmolarity will still be high here because again, you have less water to begin with. Okay, cool. Thoughts, questions so far? Makes sense. All right, Burke. So what is specific gravity?
It's basically describing I know you basically divided by the specific gravity of water.
Not specific gravity, the density of water.
The density of water to get to your number. And it's basically in two different ways of looking at the same thing. So while osmolarity is like looking at the solutes that I have in a solution, specific gravity basically gives me the information about the water that I have, the free water that I have.
Okay, yeah. You're using the right words, not quite putting them together in a way that makes sense to me, but I think you're close. So it's just the density of whatever solution it is over the density of water. That's it. So you'll note that it's unitless, right? So because I gave you, again, this is like one of those tricks. If you're hoping to get like a 240 or above, you have to always think about the units. So I gave you the units on the bottom, density. And so if you remember that specific gravity, if you know that specific gravity, you should be able to figure out what the top one should be. We'll check. So yeah, it's because it's milligrams per liter, mass per volume on both sides. So the units are gonna cancel. So then Alexa, what would specific gravity of 1.000 mean?
Would it mean that the density of the solution is equal to the density of water?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's probably water. I guess in theory, right? It could be, might not be, right? But at least in terms of words, that would be essentially water. But yeah, great. So Alexa, practically what will increase or decrease your specific gravity?
So if you really think, what would increase your specific gravity? So increasing the specific gravity of your urine would be like having more solutes in your urine.
Like what circumstances would that be?
And I'm blanking right now.
No question of what changes osmolarity, right? What changes osmolarity is either, if you want to increase your osmolarity, you either need more solute or less.
Oh, okay. So, right. If you're absorbing more free water, then you would have an increased osmolarity of your urine, which would increase your specific gravity.
Yeah, totally. Right. So anything that increases or decreases the amount of stuff dissolved over the volume of solution, right? So anything, it's the same exact principle. So Burke was right. Osmolarity and specific gravity are essentially interchangeable. Like there's a linear relationship between the two.
Is it bad to think of them like interchangeably?
No. Necessarily. If you're thinking specifically about urine specific gravity and urine osmolarity, where it gets a little confusing is that you never talk about the specific gravity of serum, you only talk about the osmolarity.
Okay, but we would only really see specific gravity talking about urine.
The only time that you really specific gravity clinically is when you talk, gosh, do they talk about it in CSF? They might, sometimes, I don't know, I just don't remember. The predominant case of specific gravity is urine.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes they'll talk about specific gravity, like they talk about baricity actually in terms of like CSF. It doesn't matter if it's like anesthesia when you do like spinals, but yeah. Really specific gravity is really a urine thing for all intent and purpose for you guys for studying for USMLE. So Adriana, so what is the specific gravity of protein-free plasma?
That would be 1.010.
Oh, be still my heart. That was wonderful. So I want you to do the next one. Adriana, so what would it mean if the urine specific gravity is 1.010? In what circumstances would you expect the urine specific gravity to be 1.010?
So if the urine specific gravity is 1.010, it would mean that you are neither reabsorbing free water nor excreting free water. So urine osmolarity is essentially the same as your serum osmolarity. And you could see this in intrarenal AKI.
Oh my gosh. Where did you learn that?
You.
Really? And how did you retain that?
Anki card.
Oh, thank you. Oh man, that like totally made my week. That was awesome. That was really good. Yeah. Right. So it means if this is like the magic number that you guys have to remember, right? If the urine specific gravity is 1.010, Gianna did such a fantastic job. I almost feel bad repeating it, but yeah, that the urine it means it's the same density as protein-free plasma. So if the kidneys can neither concentrate nor dilute urine, right? Then that would mean that urine specific gravity, that would be the circumstance. And so you're really only, like practically speaking, the only time that you're going to see this, she even anticipated my next question, the only time that you see it called isostonuria, that's the fancy term, is an intrarenal AKI. Technically, it doesn't have to be an AKI, but like intrarenal injury as opposed to prerenal. So that was wonderful. That was really good. So remember that because you're going to see it and it's real. You can use this. Like I use that all the time as a resident because you almost never get urine osmolarity. Like it's just not included in any tests. You have to order it specially. But specific gravity is on a urine dipstick, like a normal urinalysis, not urine dipstick, on a urinalysis, normal urinalysis. So you see it a lot and most people just ignore it. They just don't even think about it. But even just glancing, is it 1.010? It tells you a ton. Cool. So isostonuria, right? It means that the protein-free serum osmolarity is the same as the urine osmolarity. So in other words, the osmolarity here is the same as the osmolarity here, right? Again, the specific gravity in this case right here is the same as it would be if you were to measure the specific gravity of the serum. If it was 1.010, the specific gravities of the urine and serum would be the same. Which again, the punchline is it probably means that it's an intrarenal injury. For practical purposes, this is how you're going to see it. Great. All right. So let's go back to Susanna. So Susanna, we're going to talk. So what urine specific gravity would you expect if the kidneys were actively reabsorbing free water?
Okay, now I'm not sure, but so less, I guess less than 1.0.
Well, so think about this. Okay, so let's think. So actively reabsorbing free water, that means like high ADH. If I have high ADH, that's probably how I should have written it. Sorry. If I had high ADH, what would be the urine specific gravity?
So if you have high ADH, you will be like increasing free water. And
You got this.
will have,
What do you mean free water? Increasing free water where?
in the collecting duct, so like you will be decreasing the osmolarity in the serum, but increasing the osmolarity in the urine.
Great.
And
So what would the urine specific gravity be?
yes, that's what I'm confused because it is the same as the.
Well, okay, so think about it.
It will just then it will be increased. No, sorry, increased.
It would be
If
increased.
it's the
Great.
same.
And so what do you know? What value must it be above?
So above 1.0, 110, and 1.010.
Yes, exactly. You don't know how much above one.
Okay.
But it's going to be above. It's going to be above 1.010. That make sense?
Yeah, sorry.
What do you
So
mean?
if we're like basically increasing the reabsorption of free water, basically what urine specific gravity means, like if we have a high osmolarity in the collecting duct, we're gonna have like a higher urine specific gravity, and that's what I mean. I don't know. Like I'm a little confused.
If your osmolarity is above 300, would your specific gravity be above 1.010?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. And that's the punchline is going to be that you can take, I don't know if we talk about it in this one or the next lesson, but basically you can take the last 2 digits of specific gravity, multiply it by 30, and you'll get the osmolarity.
Okay.
So there literally is a
Okay.
So in other words,
Thank
what
you.
that means, right? So you can, I'll just do it here. We'll talk about this again in the future. So but basically you can take the last 2 digits of the urine specific gravity, multiply it by 30, and that equals this here, the osmolarity.
Where does that factor of 30 come from? What kind of constant is that?
It's a linear relationship. We can talk about that. Yeah, basically it's because, right, isothermia, right? So when the urine osmolarity equals 300, the urine specific gravity equals 1.010. That's it. So the relationship between the last 2 digits and this is a factor of 3.
Gotcha. So it's not like a natural constant or anything.
They didn't derive that or like, it's not like E equals
Okay.
X squared or something. No, it's less.
Right. Okay. Okay.
It just happens to be, yeah, I don't know.
Like gravity or something.
It might be, I don't know. There's,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
I
Okay.
don't think there's, it's not like a fundamental law of physics.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Dude. So what urine specific gravity would you expect if the kidneys were excreting free water?
Yeah, I'm actually cheating, but I saw it. It's decreased
Okay, but why? Why would that make sense?
since you're not absorbing free water into the serum, and so basically you're not able to get rid of free water from the serum, and so the osmolarity in the urine is decreased because of the presence of free water.
Again, the concept that I want you guys to remember is you guys typically are thinking about urine osmolarity. I think that's a pretty easy concept to get your wrap your head around. What I want you to do is to just make the quick translation to thinking like, okay, urine osmolarity 300, urine specific gravity is 1. So it literally is like you can look. There's like graphs of this, but you can graph the urine specific gravity versus the urine osmolarity, and it literally is a straight line. It's a linear relationship. And this works really well. So by and large, the urine osmolarity, the last 2 digits, if you multiply it by 30, it is very close to the actual osmolarity. I've tested this too, just for fun. Ordered urine osmolarity on people just to see, but yeah, it works. It really does work. So yeah, fun nights in the ICU. Okay, so Sue, when would you use urine osmolarity or urine specific gravity?
Could you use either or? Since like if one changes, okay.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, they're pretty much interchangeable, right? The key
Okay.
technically, right? They're measuring different things, but essentially it's the same. So whatever will increase the osmolarity is also going to increase the specific gravity and vice versa. And again, they'll like
Right.
learn the rough rule of urine osmolarity is about 300 if it's isotopic, and urine specific gravity
Right.
is about 1.010 if it's, again, if you're not reabsorbing or secreting free water.
Mhm.
Like true, right? So knowing those numbers is critical. That's what's really important. Why would you use one versus the other? Well, specific gravity is part of your analysis, right? So that's a pretty common test. So it's useful to know specific gravity because practically speaking, clinically, you are much more likely to know the specific gravity than you are the osmolarity. You have to you order your analysis and it's going to come with the white blood cells for high powered field and like all this stuff. You're going to see tons of stuff. Nitrite, urea, all of those things are going to come. Glucose, ketones, like you just got more information than you thought that you needed in a urinalysis. And one of those pieces of information is the specific gravity. Urine osmolarity is not a part of really any test, like any, at least not at MG or Stanford. Like it's just not a part of like any sort of like packaged test. And so you have to order it specially. And so again, if you are fluent with the idea of specific gravity of 1.010 being roughly the equivalent of a urine osmolarity of 300, you can learn a lot from just the specific gravity without having to order unnecessary tests. Especially if you know, oh yeah, intrarenal AKI, 1.010 specific gravity, really useful. You will now see this everywhere now that we pointed this out. I don't know. I might be lying. Adriana, is that true? Have you noticed, like, you seem to know the 1.010 thing. Is that true? Have you noticed? Do you see it? Do you find yourself using specific gravity, or is this like, oh, wow?
I use it a lot in questions. I can't say that I've used it like during rotation. Didn't actually know it by then.
Okay.
But in questions, I use it a lot.
Great. Yeah. And have you noticed intrarenal? You're like, oh, 1.010, like, oh, this is easy.
Definitely. Intrarenal, perirenal, everything.
Yes. That's awesome. And that's like me and my mom. That's awesome. Okay. So Paula, what is the typical serum osmolarity? We talked about this. So what's the specific gravity? Oh, yeah. Okay. So what's the specific gravity of protein active plasma, Paula?
Is that going to be 1.01?
Yeah, 1.010. So this is, you're talking about this before, how to convert. Right. So what's the urine osmolarity if the urine specific gravity is 1.010, Paula?
The osmolarity should be 10 times 30, so 300.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's the last two digits of the urine specific gravity times 30. So 1.010, take the last two digits, multiply by 30 to urine. Again, roughly. It works pretty well, actually. I don't know. It was like a week or I was on nights in the ICU. It's useful information. I wanted to see. It was all clinically appropriate, but it was also like a personal interest. I was like, oh yeah, I wonder if this is true, but it really is. So Nick, if the urine specific gravity is 1.030, what would be the approximate urine osmolarity?
That would be around 900.
Yeah, exactly. Again, same thing. Last two digits. Take the last two digits, which is 30, up by 30. Oh, pretty easy. Great. So let's give some examples. So Megan, what would the urine specific gravity or osmolarity be in a prerenal AKI and why?
So in a prerenal AKI, could it also be 1.010? So that means that there's less blood flow to the kidneys.
Great. So in that situation where there's less, but is the kidney reabsorptive function is working well or is it not?
It's not working well.
It's just not enough.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, it's the blood supply that's not getting there,
right.
But it's still able
there's less
to
blood to
filter.
be filtered,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Your filtration goes down because there's less blood to be filtered. But however, once it's filtered, you reabsorb just fine. So in that case, what will your body be thinking?
What do you mean what will your body be thinking? Like in terms...
Really vague, bad question. No, I mean, will your body be trying to reabsorb free water or not?
Yes.
What would the urine osmolarity be if you're reabsorbing free water?
It will be decreased because you will have more free water in your urine.
No, if you reabsorb free water.
Oh, yeah, if you reabsorb free water, so it'll be increased because it'll be more concentrated.
So my specific gravity will be?
Increased.
Yeah, great. Can you give me a number? Specific gravity, what would it be? What range?
I don't know, above the range, 800, 1200.
Above what?
Okay, above 300.
Above 300. Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Okay, yeah.
If you're actively reabsorbing free water, right, your osmolarity is going to be above 300. And if you're actively absorbing free water, the urine specific gravity is going to be above 1.010.
Okay.
That's what it's going to be. But again, just knowing that, it helps you a lot. Because then you're not wondering, oh man, what does it mean if the osmolarity is 400 or 500 or 600? It just means you're reabsorbing free water. That's it, to varying degrees. Knowing that cutoff is huge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
All right, Jared, what would the urine specific gravity or osmolarity be in an intrarenal AKI?
It would be 1.010 because you can't reabsorb or excrete anything extra once you get through the glomerulus.
Great. So the urine osmolarity would be?
1.010.
Osmolarity.
Oh, osmolarity, 300.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It'd be the same, right? Because you can't reabsorb or excrete free water. So the concentration is going to be unchanged relative to the serum. That's it. Cool. Hopefully this is like the simplicity of this is sinking in. It's actually not that hard as long as you understand like what's going on. So in DI, right, diabetes insipidus, where the kidneys don't respond to ADH HADRA, what would the urine-specific gravity and osmolarity be?
So there's no ADH and the kidney is losing all the free water. The free water is in the urine. So the urine specific gravity will be less than 1.010 and urine osmolarity will also be less than 300.
Like a lot less or a little less?
A lot less.
Yeah, like a lot less. Yeah, first aid says like less than 1.006. But yeah, a lot less. That's pretty lucky. That is almost water. You're almost being out of water. All right, so Giovanna, how about an SIDH? Again, you'll notice that all these things are bolded. Again, this is because it is non-intuitive. You need to practice this a lot. So I want to just flood your Anki cards. You thinking about free water, solubility, like osmolarity in the urine and serum and all this stuff. So Giovanna, what would the urine-specific gravity and osmolarity be in SIDH?
Increased. So it's going to be more than 1.0110. 10? So it's going to be more, the osmolarity is going to be more than 300. The urine osmolarity is going to be over 300.
Great. Like a lot more than 300 or just a little bit?
A lot more.
A lot more. Because again, there's really high ADH. Yeah, great. What would be your serum osmolarity?
It's going to be decreased less than 300 because you're reabsorbing water.
Love it. Oh, and I love that you're using the actual, you're using the benchmark or 300, right? It's just so much easier when you think about it that way, instead of just like having some random number. That was great. That was awesome. All right. So let's talk briefly about hypotonic hyponatremia. So Deb, what is hypotonic hyponatremia?
So hyponatremia means that serum sodium concentration is less than 130 to 35. And so hypotonic hyponatremia, and because sodium is associated with water concentration because sodium is closely associated with water, so the tonicity is important to sodium. And
yeah, basically the way to think about it is this. So sodium is the most important, generally speaking, the most important osm, right? So if your sodium is low, it means all of your osms are low. Usually. It's not always going to be the case, which we'll talk about, but usually that's going to be true, right? So if you're hypotonic hyponatremia, that means not only is your sodium low, but all of your osms are low. This will make more sense as we flash on more examples. Okay, so let's say that you have, so this is inside the cell, right? So we'll orient ourselves. So this is inside the cell and this is outside the cell. So this would be plasma interstitium, this would be inside the cells. So if you, let's say that you had SIDH, let's say that you retain a ton of free water, or alternatively, you could also, you could, I guess, drink tons and tons. But regardless, let's say that you have extra free water, right? So I've got lots of free water. So now the amount of my sodium and the amount of my other solutes is going, all of the solutes are going to go down. So all of my osmolarity is going to go down, but also my sodium is going to go down. Okay. So what direction would water flow, and would cells get larger, Danielle, or smaller? What do you think?
So water would flow, it would flow inside the cell, right? Because you have a higher solute concentration inside the cell.
Exactly. So the free water, if I have excess free water on the outside, some of that is going to go inside the cells, and that is going to cause the cells to get larger or smaller.
That would cause the cells to swell because you have a larger fluid volume now moving from the extracellular fluid to the intracellular fluid.
And now there's more there's more volume, right? There's everyone to stop. So the punchline is that in IVH, when you're symptomatic, it's thought that it's because of the cell swelling. Like your brain cells are swelling, literally, because the free water is rushing into them. And so that can cause, generally speaking, brain description. Okay. So Boogie, so what kind of hyponatremia do we actually care about, and why do we care about this?
So we're concerned about not having too much or having too little sodium, correct?
But what kind? This is, again, if you haven't done the hyponatremia lecture, if it's been a while, it says, it might be a little hard. I guess here.
I would argue if you had, I guess, not enough water.
Sorry, this is a bad question because there's not a lot of context. So the key thing that you have to know is that it has to be hypotonic hyponatremia. Sodium is the main osm in the serum. So if it's low, typically the osmolarity is also going to be low. However, really what we care about is the total osmolarity. So if the total osmolarity is low, we don't care, right? So it is possible to have a hypertonic hyponatremia. For example, in this diagram, right? Our sodium could be low because you have just way too much free water. That is possible. However, it's also possible that if you have tons of glucose or tons of BUN, if you have DKA or hyperosmolar, or whatever they call it now, or really high BUN, right? Your total osmolarity might be high. If I had just like tons of BUN, your total osmolarity might be really high, but your sodium concentration might be low. If your total osmolarity is high, right? If it's hypertonic hyponatremia, total osmolarity high, but sodium concentration low, that's not going to cause the symptoms of hyponatremia, because you're not going to have the free water enter into the cell. If this doesn't make sense, I encourage you to go through the hyponatremia lectures.
I understand.
Because again, this is like, I packed a lot into this question, so I had to make choices about what to include. So yeah, if this doesn't make sense, there's a lot of really good material in the hyponatremia lectures. So Burke, what are the symptoms of hypertonic hyponatremia?
Generally, dizziness, like
They're like vague, basically neurologic. There's headache, patch vomiting, but pretty vague, but they're mainly neurologic. So what's thought to cause those symptoms is, like we said, cell swelling. And so, Adriana, how would the brain cells adapt to the cell swelling in hyponatremia? And what's the mechanism?
Oh God. Okay. Brain cells adapt to the cell swelling and hyponatremia. I'm not entirely sure about that one.
Basically, they increase their intracellular osmolytes, but basically the intracellular osmolarity is decreased. There's things that contribute to the osmolarity inside. And so the idea is that they're trying to decrease their osmolarity so that more water leaves. So, right, you've got, on the inside, you've got proteins and a lot of potassium, but you've also got these other things like inositol. So the idea, hypertonic hyponatremia, I have a lot of free water on the outside. That water is going to shift towards the inside. That's going to cause your cells to swell. However, your brain cells are not going to like that. You're going to get some vague neurologic symptoms like nausea or vomiting or dizziness or sometimes even coma. It's really bad. And so your brain responds by decreasing the osmolarity here. And if your osmolarity decreases here, that what ends up happening is that more water is going to leave, right, to try to balance out the osmolarity. Cool? Okay. So again, the punchline of this, the thing that we are building towards is that hyponatremia is a problem of free water, not of sodium. Paula is asking, are the brain cells the only ones that can remove their osmolytes to compensate? I don't know. Probably not. It doesn't really matter as much in other cells. The reason why it matters so much in the brain is because it's one of the few places where it's a pretty enclosed space. Like you have fascial compartments and stuff that enclose other compartments, but it's really enclosed. So even a moderate amount of swelling can cause neurologic dysfunction. So it really matters most in the brain. Probably other cells have mechanisms to do that though, but you're not going to be tested. Okay, to Susanna, is hyponatremia a problem of losing too much sodium or having too much free water?
Too much free water.
Yeah, exactly. Too much free water. Remember it. Just remember it. So why it's not a problem of losing too much sodium? Because water will follow sodium. If you lose sodium, you're going to lose water in equal proportion. So it's not just something that loses sodium is not the reason why you get hyponatremia. Okay, so sodium loss, right? So if I lose sodium, I'll say I just lose sodium. Really, I'm also losing water too. So the total osmolarity is not changing. That's the key. Right. And again, even though the total sodium concentration is going to stay the same, even though the total number of sodium molecules might be decreased. That is like critical. So this we talked about in the hyponatremia lectures. So I'm going to go over this again briefly. But when you're looking at hyponatremia, there's basically 3 questions to ask. So the first is it truly hypertonic hyponatremia, right? Like we discussed briefly, if you have high other things like glucose or really high BUN, you could have high osmolarity or high tonicity, but low sodium. In that case, we don't care if the sodium is low. There was a case that we had at MGH in the ICU where there was a guy that had like really bad kidney failure. And his sodium was like, I can't remember, it was pretty low. It was like 130, like maybe high 120s. Really bad kidney failure because his BUN was so high. His sodium was low, but his osmolarity was high. And for the longest, I don't know, probably like 2 or 3 days, we were treating the hyponatremia, like not treating it, but we were monitoring it because we were worried about him getting central fontanine myelinitis. And then eventually I realized that it was like we as a team were being silly. Because again, you don't care. If it's not hypertonic, you don't care. Sodium, there's nothing magical about sodium. It just happens to be the osm, the largest osm in your blood until it's not, right? And if it's not, then you don't care. So is it hypertonic hyponatremia? The second question is, if it's hypertonic hyponatremia, what's the volume status? The volume's too high, diurese, right? You do free water restriction. If the volume's too low, you go volume. If you're euvolemic though, that's the key, right? So then if you're euvolemic, then you move on. If you're euvolemic, then the next question to ask is, are they symptomatic? If they're symptomatic, you use hypertonic sealing. Again, really only relevant for courtships / shelf exams and stuff too. If they're not, if they're asymptomatic, then you just go after the underlying cause. So again, the question that people always have is like, when do you use hypertonic saline? It's actually very limited circumstances. You have to be euvolemic, you have to be hypotonic hyponatremia, and you have to be symptomatic. So for more, please see the hyponatremia lectures. Okay, so sentence by sentence vignettes. So the significance, so I'm going to go through briefly what the different sentences meant. So his old guy brought you to the hospital by his wife, and because he's confused. So he's disoriented to time and place. The significance is he has CNS dysfunction, right? In other words, he is symptomatic, right? Like we said, the only kind of hyponatremia that you care about is hypotonic hyponatremia, where the euvolemic and symptomatic. So he's symptomatic. So again, that was implied by the first sentence, right? So the patient was so bad that his wife had to bring him in. Also a clue if it's Alzheimer's versus they're just getting old and they're worried about it. If it's Alzheimer's, someone else is going to bring them in, right? If it's just like they're getting old and they're worried about it, then they're going to bring themselves in. So again, in the rules of management, if it's symptomatic, you're going to do the more invasive option. So again, hypertonic saline. So his mucous membranes are moist and there's no jugular venous distension, and the lungs require auscultation bilaterally. So why is that important? That's important because again, oopsies. Oh, I didn't. Well, the reason is because he's euvolemic, right? His volume status, he's not hypervolemic, right? There's not jugular venous distension, but he's not hypovolemic. So it's not, mucous membranes are not dry. His lungs require auscultation, again, he's not hypervolemic. So the significance of that is that he is euvolemic. Great. Okay. Next is, right, his serum sodium is low and his serum osmolarity is low. That's important because, again, it's hypotonic hyponatremia. In other words, it's not strep hyponatremia. It's not because the osms are high for other reasons and it's artificially making the sodium look low. Oh, that was why I just mixed up where I put this. Okay. And so the urine specific gravity is 1.041. The significance again is that was my standard for urine osmolarity. So in SADH, your ADH is really high, so you're reabsorbing tons of free water, so your urine osmolarity is much higher than your serum osmolarity. So this would be like a really, really high urine osmolarity, like around 1200. Great. Okay, so now we are going to go back to your vignettes the pathophysiologic chronologies that you were making. Give you several minutes to revise them based on what we discussed, and we'll talk about it. Okay, great, thanks. All right, I am going to go through and look at something. So I actually just went to the bathroom. My urine was really pale. I don't know if it's appropriate to say that, but so Adriana, could you tell me what would my urine specific gravity and urine osmolarity likely be if you were to measure it?
Your personal case or
In my personal case.
it would be low. So specific gravity would probably be less than 1.010. And urine osmolarity would be less than 300.
Boom. Love it. Very good. All right. So Adriana, let's look at yours. So male with 50-pack year history, develops lung cancer. Wonderful. Yeah. Specifically, again, I want you to say it should be small cell, right? Not just any lung cancer. We'll give this to you. It's got to be small cell. Got to be small. So small cell lung cancer. That leads to weight loss, right? Because it's cancer. And paraneoplastic syndrome, SIDH, right? We have the restless due water, CNS symptoms. Yep, that's good. Again, you could, I mean, you
About the
give a
the
little,
hypo.
right? You can say like how it happened, but sure, that's fine. You high urine specific gravity and low serum osmolarity. Good. Okay. So hypotonic hyponatremia, only absorbing free water, not sodium. Euvolemic. Good. So treat with hypertonic saline. Great. Excellent. Yeah. Nice. Let us go to Berg. A patient with longstanding cough. Yeah. Now weight loss, plus lung cancer. Again, I would do this in the form of a pathophysiologic chronology. In other words, from the day that he was born to the day that he presented, I want you to put all these things together, not sort of sentence by sentence, which is what I think you did. Because you kind of went through like, oh, first sentence, oh, old guy, coughing, smoking, oh, maybe lung cancer. Instead, I would do it like Adriana did. Other than that, that looks pretty good. Initially hypovolemic, now ANP. That's pretty good. Yeah, good. We didn't talk about the mechanism for why you become hypovolemic, euvolemic. And that's ADH, but that is the reason. Yeah, hypertonic. Yeah. Democlocycline. Gosh, would you use democlocycline? Yeah, I guess you could. Or maybe just try and treat this small cell lung cancer. Okay, good. So I will tell you what my pathophysiologic chronology was, and we will go from there. So again, my detailed pathophysiologic chronology would be significant smoking history. Again, small cell lung cancer is the most smoker-associated cancer, right? Small cell and squamous cell both are the ones that are most associated with smoking, but small cell especially, right? The people that have really high pack years, like 50 pack years. 100 pac-years. That would be small cell. So it's a neuroendocrine tumor, right? So neuro meaning it responds to neural signals, and endocrine meaning it can release hormones. So unsurprisingly, it can release ADH. So it will release ADH. That means you're going to reabsorb free water from the collecting tubule. So your urine osmolarity and specific gravity are going to be up, like really up, and your serum osmolarity is going to be low. So you get hypotonic hypernatremia, right? So loss of sodium in response to the volume increase. Oh, I guess I did say that. Yeah, it's from the ANP. So initially, technically, maybe you get, the thought is that you're hypervolemic initially because you have so much free water reabsorption. And so you respond to that by releasing things like ANP or BNP. And so you lose sodium in response. So you end up being euvolemic, right? So euvolemia with hypotonic hypernatremia. So free water is going to enter the cells to balance the cell osmolarity. That's going to lead to cell swelling and CNS dysfunction. Ultimately, the need to treat with hypertonic saline. Because again, you don't really, it's only if it's symptomatic and hypotonic hypernatremia and euvolemia. It's like such specific situations. So yeah, again, if that doesn't make a ton of sense to you, please enjoy the hyponatremia lectures. Okay, so our summary of key concepts is this. So summary of key concepts. So SIDH means that there's an excess reabsorption of free water. That means your urine osmolarity is going to be high and your serum osmolarity is going to be low. Right? More free water is going to go into your serum, so your serum osmolarity is going to go low, and you're going to lose free water. You're going to reabsorb free water from the urine, so the osmolarity in the urine is going to go up. The neurologic symptoms from SIDH are from the free water shifts, as we talked about, which cause cell swelling in the brain and causes cerebral dysfunction. Remember, true hyponatremia, hypotonic hyponatremia, not the mimics like hypertonic hyponatremia. It's a problem of having too much free water. It is not a problem with sodium. Remember that. It's so common. It's such a common mistake. It is because you have too much free water. So you do not become hyponatremic by losing sodium in the urine. That is in and of itself insufficient, right? You have to have too much free water. So lots of things cause hyponatremia, as you'll learn in the hyponatremia lectures if you haven't watched them yet. The only time that you really use hypertonic saline as a treatment is if you're symptomatic and you have hypotonic hyponatremia and you're euvolemic. All right, questions, thoughts, concerns? I know that was a lot. Sue?
Hey, Alec, could you go back to the detailed slide real quick?
Absolutely.
Like with your PC, but where you have loss of sodium in response to volume increase, could you clarify that a little bit since we were just talking about how you have the loss of free water?
Yeah, I guess if I were to, So basically the idea is that you're reabsorbing free water from the collecting duct and collecting tubule.
Yeah.
Is that going to cause you to become hypervolemic, euvolemic, or hypovolemic?
Hypervolemic, right?
But you're going to be hypervolemic.
Okay.
So it's going to be, why do you end up being euvolemic in SAD?
Because the water is going into the cells?
Well, partially. That's a good point. Yeah, that's partially. But the other reason is because you
lose sodium. Okay. I'll have to watch like other lectures that you were talking about. So I'll hold off on any more questions.
So in other words, how does your kidney respond, or how does your heart respond? If your atrium swells, how does your heart respond? That's a bad question. You really have
like increases the volume. It's stroke. Sorry, what was it? AMP?
Atrial natriuretic output.
The opposite of ADH?
No, it's basically, it causes you to lose sodium. Naturally.
I got you.
Right? Na.
Oh, yes. I got you. Okay.
Right. So atrial, release in the atrium. Naturally, right? So lose sodium in your urine.
I got you. Okay. Yeah.
So, like your body responds in general to having too much volume by releasing things like ANP and BNP, brain.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. I totally forgot about that.
Like the reason why I included this is because it's a little weird. Like you would totally think. I didn't go into this by hesitation too much. I included this because it's a little weird to think, okay, I'm going to reabsorb free water. But now I'm going to be euvolemic?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Your atrium swells and so your stretches and so you release ANP and your brain releases BNB. But yeah, you lose sodium in response so that it balances out the free water.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Great question. Other question. Thoughts, concern? You're going to next.
I have a question about, really quick, sorry. This is about last week's session on the countercurrent multiplication.
Sure.
That session, are you going to upload it or were we just going to refer to the previous one?
I think Nicole's just.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Other questions? That was a good question. All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So again, next to your MAP equals cardiac output times TPR. preload, afterload, contractility next to your tattoo. If I was going to add a second thing, I would think about specific gravity is 1.010, isotonuria is urine osmolarity, or translates to urine osmolarity. Those are pretty good numbers to know. They come up a lot, as Adriana has pointed out. So awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I think we've got another session next week. So hopefully, yeah, we should be able to post this soon. So I'll follow up. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
If Renal finally makes sense, the next video ties the whole exam together. You'll learn the framework that prevents missing questions you already know and how to virtually guarantee 90+% on every topic. Click here to watch how to virtually guarantee a Step 2 pass and see how students went from failing to 260+.